You have asked, how will I know when someone is meant for me? But the answer does not lie in signs or sensations. It lies in what is constellated within your unconscious, what awakens, what stirs, what is remembered. Is the right person someone who heals you or someone who reveals your wounds? Do they mirror your longing, or do they carry the unlived life you have exiled into shadow? What if the person who feels right is not here to complete you, but to confront you with your own capacity for wholeness? You will find no checklist here, only a descent into the soul's symbolic logic, a passage through projection, shadow, anima, and the great mystery of psychic correspondence. You are not drawn to others by accident. You are summoned, and to meet the one who is right is not the end of your search, but the beginning of your transformation. Introduction. A wanderer stands at a crossroads in the forest. He has traveled long in solitude. The path behind him has faded, overgrown with the quiet insistence of forgotten choices. Before him lie two roads. One gleams with sunlight, flanked by blossoms that lean as if to greet him. The other is dim, heavy with moss and shadow, its threshold choked with roots. But he does not choose, he waits. From the stillness of the trees, a figure appears, not radiant, not imposing, but quiet, unannounced. They do not speak, but their eyes meet his, and something wordless passes between them. Not a thrill, not certainty, but a stillness, as if something long sleeping within the wanderer begins to stir. Not because he has found something new, but because he has remembered something old. A return, not a discovery. So it is when the right person appears. They do not arrive with trumpets, nor dressed in the garments of fantasy. They do not complete you, but they uncover you. They mirror not your desires, but your essence. They do not confirm your expectations, they awaken your depths. This is the paradox we must begin with. The right person is rarely the one we imagine, and even more rarely the one who brings only joy. The right person does not fulfill the fantasy of love. They shatter it. They do not protect the ego. They call it into question. They do not echo the persona, but instead evoke the self. What then is this strange and silent recognition we call rightness? What is this sensation that tells us this one is different? Is it the fulfillment of destiny, or the voice of the unconscious seeking itself in another form? Let us not begin with romance. Let us begin with reality, psychic, archetypal, and symbolic, because the experience of deep resonance with another human being is not merely interpersonal, it is transpersonal. It is the movement of the unconscious summoning itself into visibility. When the right person appears, the self is speaking, not in words, but in images, emotions, synchronicities, and silent certainties that defy logic. I have often observed that people describe this sensation as a stillness, a quieting of the mind, a sudden awareness of being seen, not in image, but in essence. And the image that appears inwardly is not always one of pleasure. It may be sorrow, recognition, fear, even resistance. Yet beneath these reactions lies something unmistakable. The psyche has stirred. One must not confuse this with infatuation. Infatuation is the projection of the inner opposite upon another, the anima or animus clothed in flesh. Infatuation blinds, recognition reveals. The first is a fantasy thrown outward. The second is a silence that draws inward. So I ask, what is it that you truly seek when you say you want to meet the right person? Is it comfort, or is it confrontation? Is it companionship, or is it completion? And more dangerously, is it salvation? Because the truth is difficult. The right person may not be the one who makes you happy. They may be the one who unsettles your sleep, who disturbs your patterned life, who awakens forgotten parts of your being that you had long ago exiled into shadow. And yet, when they appear, you know, not with certainty, but with recognition, not with the heart's fire, but with the soul's echo. It is not, I have found them, it is, I remember. In analytical psychology, we do not speak of soulmates in the romantic sense. We speak of the self, and the self, being totality, seeks itself through many forms, often through the other, the stranger, the one whose very existence constellates what you have not lived. Thus, the appearance of the right person is never truly about them. It is about you, or rather, it is about the parts of you that are now ready to be seen, known, and brought into wholeness. And so, we must ask a more profound question than, is this the right person? We must ask, what within me has become ready to be remembered? Because you see, the psyche is always in movement toward completion, toward what I have called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming what one truly is. And those who come into our lives at the right time are not rewards. They are reflections. They are not blessings. They are demands. They demand that we see ourselves more clearly, that we abandon the safety of projection and the illusions of perfection, that we relinquish control and enter into relationship not for possession, but for transformation. You may think you are falling in love, but often you are falling into the unconscious. And what you call love is the soul's recognition of itself in the mirror of the other. Do not mistake ease for truth. The truest connections do not smooth the ego, they strip it. They do not flatter, they challenge. And yet they also soothe something deeper, the ancient hunger of the soul to be known not in fragments but in totality. And so, I tell you, when the right person comes, you may not smile. You may weep, you may feel unease, you may feel something inside you shift as if an old architecture is beginning to collapse. That is the sign, not fireworks, not certainty, but a turning inward, a sudden silence in which you begin to hear the voice you had long ignored. The one that speaks not in language, but in longing. The one that does not say, you have found them, but instead asks, are you ready now to become who you are? And with that question, the journey begins. Let us proceed. Part 1. The psyche's magnetism toward wholeness. We must begin with the secret law of the psyche. It moves toward wholeness. Just as the acorn contains the form of the oak, the psyche carries within it a blueprint, not of perfection, but of totality. This movement is not linear, not conscious, not always gentle. It is a spiral, a dance, an unfolding whose rhythm follows neither the desires of the ego nor the logic of reason. It follows necessity, psychic, archetypal, and ancient. The self, that invisible totality of the person, does not move directly. It speaks in dreams, in symptoms, in synchronicities, and most powerfully, in relationships. For it is in the encounter with the other that the hidden parts of ourselves are most clearly revealed. Here lies the first truth of attraction. It is not personal, it is archetypal. What draws us is not merely charm, appearance, or shared values, but the mysterious recognition of that which we have lost, suppressed, or forgotten. The right person is often not the one who pleases the ego, but the one who constellates the forgotten parts of the soul. Consider for a moment the myth of Psyche and Eros. It is not the tale of romantic fulfillment. It is the tale of ordeal, betrayal, death, and ultimately awakening. Psyche is drawn to Eros not with ease, but with blindness. She does not even know who he is. When she lights the lamp to see him, her action destroys the illusion, and she is cast into trial. And yet, it is precisely through these trials that she is made whole. Love does not save her. Love demands that she become worthy of the vision she once destroyed. This is the movement of the self in disguise. Attraction, when authentic, is not merely a feeling. It is a summons. It is the soul being pulled toward the next layer of its own unfolding. And this is why so many resist the very relationships that would heal them, because they sense, sometimes without knowing, that this person is not here to comfort their current identity, but to transform it. The ego, which seeks stability, resists this. It desires affirmation, not alteration. But the self has no interest in comfort. It seeks only one thing: truth. I have observed again and again that when the right person appears, something quiet occurs, not a loud exclamation, but a stillness. A dissonance resolves, not into pleasure, but into alignment. One does not feel saved. One feels seen, not praised, but summoned. This sensation often confuses those who expect love to be intoxicating. They expect the right person to make them feel elevated, complete, euphoric, and yet the reality is far more paradoxical. The right person often brings one down, not in diminishment, but in grounding. They awaken not ecstasy, but gravity. A man once came to me with a recurring dream. He stood at the edge of a wide river, watching the current sweep past. Across the water stood a figure, holding a lantern. The man did not know her, but he did not doubt her. Each time he reached for the bridge, it collapsed. Each time he called out, she remained silent. But each time he awoke, he felt a quiet longing, not for her, but for what she represented. I think she's waiting, he told me, but I don't know what for. I answered him, she waits for you to become ready. Later, he would meet a woman who stirred, Nothing of the dramatic passions he had chased in his youth. He felt no fireworks, only stillness. He felt not overwhelmed, but called, and in her presence old habits began to dissolve. His speech slowed, his judgment softened. He became not someone else, but more of himself, and in that becoming, the bridge from the dream finally held. This is how the self moves. It does not shout, it waits. It brings to us the person who will hold the necessary mirror, not to show us what we want to see, but what we must see. Sometimes what we fear, often what we long for but cannot name. We speak often of chemistry as if the psyche were a laboratory. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This is the essence of psychic relationship, not pleasure, not security, but transformation. And so the question becomes, when someone stirs you, what part of you do they stir? Is it your fantasy, your wound, your forgotten gift? Are they calling you forward, or are they repeating a pattern? Are you being invited to become more whole, or are you being pulled back into the familiar hell of your own unexamined longing? The soul recognizes itself even when the ego is blind. The soul does not care if the person is convenient, desirable, or appropriate. It sees only the symbolic resonance. This one carries something I have yet to live. This one, if I am brave, may become the catalyst for becoming. But to follow such a resonance is not easy. It requires courage, not to love, but to be changed. It requires the willingness to see the other not as salvation, but as a symbol, not as perfection, but as process. And it requires the painful acceptance that even the right person may not stay, because their purpose may not be to remain, but to awaken. And this too must be said. Not everyone who stirs you is meant to stay. Some arrive only to show you what you are ready to feel. Some bring only a single piece of the puzzle. Some appear not to complete your story, but to compel you to begin writing it. This is why the ego must not dictate the terms of relationship, because the ego seeks stability and the self seeks transformation. The ego desires security, the self desires integration. The right person is therefore not a prize, but a teacher, not an answer, but a mirror. And if you gaze long enough, not into their eyes, but into the place where your souls touch, you will feel it. A pull, a stillness, and a whisper that says, here is the part of you that has waited long to return. And that is the beginning, not of the relationship, but of the real work. Let us move forward. Part 2, the inner opposite, Anima and Animus in recognition. You do not recognize the right person because they complete you. You recognize them because they carry within their being the echo of something already living within you, long exiled, long forgotten, long unloved. This inner echo is the voice of your psychic counterpart, the inner opposite, the anima if you are a man, the animus if you are a woman. When you meet another who resonates with this figure, not impersonally, but as a human vessel, it is not a new experience, it is remembrance. We must begin here. Not with romance, not with compatibility, but with the archetypal dynamic that rules the unconscious relation between the sexes. For a man, the anima is the soul image, often suppressed, idealized, or misunderstood. She is the feeling, the mystery, the eros that lives behind his rational defenses. For a woman, the animus is the spirit image, the noetic voice, the logos that both inspires and dominates. These figures are not merely parts of personality, they are autonomous presences, living within the collective unconscious and shaping our perception of the other. When unconscious, these figures distort, they possess, they enchant. A man might see in a woman not her reality, but the projection of his own longing for wholeness. She becomes the mirror of his unlived life, the container for his emotional dependency. A woman might see in a man not his substance, but the projection of her inner judge, her savior, or her tyrant. In such encounters, one does not meet the other. They meet the unconscious. But when these inner figures are gradually integrated, when a man begins to develop his own feeling life, his own capacity for interiority, for mystery, for intuition, he is no longer controlled by the anima. He no longer searches for her in others because he has met her within. And the same for a woman, when she has encountered her own animus, when she has entered into dialogue with the voices of certainty and doubt that move through her thoughts, she is no longer at the mercy of them. She no longer seeks in others what she has refused to cultivate in herself. This is the essential precondition for meeting the right person, the withdrawal of unconscious projection. The internal marriage precedes the external union. Only when you have begun to relate to your own inner opposite can you relate to another as they truly are. Only then does recognition become possible. Recognition is not revelation. It is not thunder, nor even light. It is the strange stillness that comes when you look into the eyes of another and feel, not desire, not safety, but familiarity. Something in you ceases its search. Something in you stops performing. It is not the end of loneliness. It is the beginning of presence. Dreams often precede this moment. I have seen countless examples. A man dreams night after night of a silent woman standing by a well. She never speaks. He never dares approach, but she watches. Then one night she says, "I am not waiting for you. I am waiting for you to listen." Soon after, he meets a woman whose words echo that same silence. He cannot explain why she matters, but in her presence he becomes more himself. Or a woman dreams of a house filled with books, none of which she is allowed to read. A man appears and says, "These are your thoughts. I am only here to remind you that they are yours." And in her waking life, she meets a man who does not impress her, but who challenges her to trust her voice. She does not fall for him, she awakens near him. This is the subtle alchemy of recognition. You do not feel completed, you feel restored to a process you had abandoned. The rightness of the other lies not in what they give you, but in what they awaken in you. Not ecstasy, but return. I must be clear, the inner opposite is not a sentimental figure. The anima, when neglected, becomes seductive, chaotic, or withdrawn. She stirs longing, but refuses to be possessed. She destroys illusions. She is the witch, the muse, the queen, the siren. When honored, she becomes the soul's guide, the Sophia who illuminates the inner world. The animus, when unconscious, becomes dogmatic, critical, or invasive. He speaks in judgments, not insight, but when honored, he becomes the logos within, the inner voice of reason, structure, and spiritual clarity. When these figures are integrated, something shifts in the outer world. You stop falling for ghosts. You stop mistaking longing for love. You stop projecting your unlived life onto others. And then one day, someone appears, not to complete you, but to meet you. Goethe captured this truth in Elective Affinities, that certain people come together not by choice, but by necessity, by chemical reaction of soul to soul. And yet Goethe also knew that these affinities are not without danger. To recognize the other is also to risk being transformed. That is why so few endure it. Because recognition is not confirmation, it is confrontation. The right person calls you to the self, not with flattery, but with fire. They see what you have not dared to live. They speak what you have silenced. They do not complete your story. They force you to rewrite it. In truth, to be ready for the right person is not to be perfected. It is to have entered the inner dialogue enough that their presence no longer intoxicates, but resonates. They do not pull you out of yourself. They invite you deeper in. They do not dazzle you. They disturb you into wholeness. And when this happens, when the eyes of the other reflect not your fantasy but your reality, there is no need to explain. There is only silence, recognition, and then the work begins. Let us move forward. Part 3, the silence of the self, the inner signal. There is a kind of silence that does not come from absence, but from presence. Not the void of emptiness, but the fullness of meaning beyond words. When the right person enters one's life, not as fantasy, not as projection, but as a mirror of the self, this is the quality of stillness that emerges. It is not excitement, not a storm of emotion, not the intoxication of desire. It is the uncanny hush of recognition, as if a long-forgotten name has been spoken without sound. This silence is not passive. It is the stillness that falls before a sacred encounter. The breath the soul holds before it speaks to itself through another face. One must distinguish here between silence that is dead and silence that is alive. The silence of repression, of fear, of avoidance, this is the silence that isolates and hardens. But the silence of recognition, of truth too deep for speech, this is the silence that awakens. It is the voice of the self, not in language, but in presence. I have seen many confuse chaos for depth and silence for absence. But the psyche does not speak in the terms of the marketplace. The psyche is not interested in novelty or stimulation. It is interested in truth. And the truth, when glimpsed, often arrives quietly. The encounter with the right person does not necessarily stir the passions, but it shakes the foundations. It does not flatter the ego, but it aligns the soul. In one dream, a patient stands in a vast library. Every book bears their name, but all the pages are blank. They grow frantic, trying to find one that contains their story. Then a figure enters, unknown but strangely familiar. They open a book, begin to read aloud, and the words, though never heard before, feel remembered. This is the experience I speak of, a moment in which the self recognizes itself in another, not because they are identical or because they fulfill our fantasies, but because they reflect a part of the soul we had not yet dared to claim. And this recognition is not loud, it is not explosive, it is quiet, solemn, undeniable. The modern obsession with intensity blinds many to this truth. We chase those who make us feel alive because we have grown numb. We equate emotional turbulence with depth because we have not learned to sit with the stillness that true presence requires. We are drawn to those who disturb us not because they reflect our depth, but because they amplify our inner chaos. But when one has entered into dialogue with the unconscious, when one has suffered through projection and retrieved it, when one has ceased the search for outer completion, then the self may send another. And this other may not be what you imagined. They may not dazzle, they may not provoke, but their presence will feel inevitable, right? Like a rhythm you once knew and have just remembered how to breathe with. Stillness does not mean ease. Often it means confrontation with what is essential, with what can no longer be avoided. The rightness of a person is not their compatibility with your habits. It is their capacity to draw out what is unfinished in you, not with force, but with presence. This presence speaks not to your ego, but to your depths. You may find that in their company, you say less, you perform less, you feel less need to explain. Something relaxes, not because you are safe, but because you are seen, and not even by them, by yourself, through them. This is why the wrong person often makes more noise. Their presence activates the projections, the fantasies, the unlived complexes. They stir what is unresolved, and we mistake the emotional escalation for meaning. But it is not meaning, it is the ego in crisis. It is the shadow taking center stage. The right person, however, does not provoke drama. They provoke depth. They do not spin you into ecstasy or despair. They draw you inward, like a tide pulling you into yourself. And in their company, you begin to remember things you had forgotten. Values, feelings, thoughts, possibilities. You begin to speak not in cleverness, but in truth. You feel no need to entertain or to impress. You simply are. This is not because they complete you. It is because they do not demand performance. Their presence resonates with your being, not your persona. They evoke your substance, not your image. One might say, the wrong person dazzles the eyes. The right person listens to the silence between your words. The wrong person triggers anxiety disguised as attraction. The right person brings your contradictions into the same room and waits. In such moments, the self becomes audible, not in speech, but in sensation. A calm knowing, a recognition, the feeling that something has returned, or perhaps that something has finally arrived that was always waiting. And I have heard it said that when the right person arrives, the soul sighs. Not because it is finished, but because it can begin. Let us proceed. Part 4. Synchronicity and the unconscious path to meeting. In the unfolding of life, the conscious mind clings to cause and effect. It demands explanations, time frames, logic. But the psyche has another law. The self does not guide by linear direction. It shapes through meaning. And so, when the right person enters one's life, it is rarely by plan or prediction. It is by synchronicity. Synchronicity is not coincidence. It is not mere chance. It is the meeting of inner necessity with outer event, when the pattern of the unconscious takes visible form in the external world. It is the language of the self, not in words, but in time. And it is through this symbolic law that the right person appears. There are encounters that cannot be explained, not because they are magical, but because they are meaningful. The soul knows something before the ego catches up. One looks into the eyes of another and remembers a dream. A phrase is spoken that once arose in solitude. A gesture mirrors a forgotten image. The other is not recognized by face, but by feeling. A woman dreams of a gate at dawn opening onto a fogged field. She does not know what lies beyond, but there is a feeling, solemn, expectant, ancient. 1 week later, in a mundane setting, she meets someone whose voice evokes that same quiet inevitability. Nothing dramatic occurs, and yet within her, a gate swings open. These are not fantasies, they are synchronicities. The psyche has ripened, the self has prepared, and so the outer world aligns. Not to please the ego, but to challenge it, to deepen it, to lead it toward wholeness. This is why one must not seek frantically for the right person. For that which is truly meaningful does not come by force. It comes by readiness. The self does not deliver gifts, it delivers initiations. And the other, when they arrive, do not offer comfort. They offer transformation. The myth of Odysseus and Penelope speaks to this. They are not mere lovers. They are destinies split across time, held in separate trials until the soul has earned its recognition. Odysseus must wander, suffer, descend. Penelope must wait, weave, endure. Only then, when each has become what they were meant to become, do they meet again, not as fantasy, but as fulfillment. So too in life, the other appears not when you want them, but when the soul can bear the truth of their reflection. The right person is not given, they are revealed. And this revelation does not follow the laws of planning, but of pattern. I recall a case in which a man, after years of chaotic relationships, withdrew from pursuit. He did not give up. He simply turned inward. He began working with his dreams. He confronted his shadow. He ceased to perform. And during this time, he dreamt of a stone temple by a river. A woman knelt within it, not calling him, not looking at him, simply present. Months later, he met her. She had not dreamt of him, but her presence had waited in his depths. This is how the soul arranges its encounters, not for drama, not for completion, but for revelation. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This is not a metaphor. It is an observation of psychological fact. When two people truly meet, not in persona, not in fantasy, but in self, the psyche changes. One is no longer who one was. The patterns shift. The inner landscape is altered. And yet, this transformation is not always visible. It may be quiet, gradual, even invisible to the outer world, but within, something essential has turned. The unconscious recognizes the presence of what it had been preparing for. It is important to note, this encounter is not always permanent. The right person may not stay, their presence may be brief, but this does not lessen the encounter. For what matters is not duration, but depth, not continuity, but contact. Synchronicity reveals itself most often in retrospect. Only later do we see how the paths aligned, how the timing was precise, how the psyche orchestrated its own necessity. And so we must remain vigilant, not in effort, but in openness, not in search, but in perception. For the self does not shout. It sends symbols, it stirs dreams, it quiets the mind before the soul must listen. And when the right person appears, the confirmation is not excitement, but silence. Not fireworks, but a low bell that tolls from within. One must learn to recognize this tolling, to respect the slow rhythms of the unconscious, to walk not in pursuit, but in presence. For the one who will see you cannot be summoned, they can only be met. And the place of that meeting is not a location. It is a moment, a readiness, a clearing in the forest of the psyche where two paths, long separated, finally converge. Let us walk deeper still. Part 5. The mirror of conflict. Why the right person challenges you. There exists a misconception, born of longing and sustained by fantasy, that the right person will soothe every ache, resolve every conflict, and deliver us into a state of peaceful certainty. But the soul does not evolve through ease. It is not comfort, but confrontation that transforms. And so the arrival of the right person does not mark an end to suffering. It initiates a deeper encounter with it. The one who truly sees you will not only reflect your light, but reveal your fractures. They will not reinforce the persona you have built to survive, but call forth the self you have not yet dared to become. The ego will resist this, for the ego prefers to be adored, not revealed. It wants admiration, not initiation. But the soul wants something else. It wants to be known. When the right person enters, you will feel this tension. It will not always feel good. It will feel true. Their presence may unsettle the old scripts. Their gaze may unmask the false identity. They will not rescue you from your wounds. They will require that you meet them. A man dreams of standing atop a mountain that splits beneath his feet. From the crevice walks a figure holding a mirror. He expects to see his face in it, but instead sees the moments he has most wished to forget. The mirror does not accuse him, it invites him, and he falls to his knees, not in shame, but in recognition. This is what the right person does. They hold the mirror, not to judge, but to reflect, not to correct, but to reveal. Understand this: no individuation is possible without tension, without conflict between opposites. And relationship is the field in which this tension is most intensely lived. The other is not simply another person. They are an image, an echo, a constellation of your own psychic material. In them, you will find not only what you desire, but what you have denied. This is why the right person may stir your deepest resistance. You may feel pulled toward them, and yet simultaneously feel afraid, not because they are unsafe, but because they are unfamiliar. They awaken parts of you that have long been dormant. They challenge the roles you have played, the stories you have told, the defenses you have used. They threaten the equilibrium of the false self. It is tempting to flee from this, to call it incompatibility, to find someone easier, someone who mirrors only your comforts, not your contradictions. But in doing so, you abandon the work, the real work of soul-making, the task of holding the tension without running, the alchemy of becoming through relation. The myth of Jacob wrestling the angel comes to mind. A solitary figure struggles through the night with something he cannot name. He is wounded in the struggle, yet by morning he is blessed. He receives a new name. He becomes what he was meant to be, not through victory, but through endurance. So too in love. The right person does not heal you. They wound you in the necessary place. They activate the unlived life. They provoke the shadow, not to harm you, but to reveal you to yourself. A patient once told me of a partner who always made him feel exposed, not criticized, but seen. He felt both drawn and repelled. Over time, he realized this woman was mirroring his own buried desire to be authentic. She did not permit performance. She called forth presence. Their relationship was not easy, but it was true. In dreams, this experience often appears as fire or breaking, a house being torn down, a beloved figure transforming into a lion. These images symbolize the psychic heat required to melt the ego's shell. The right person, in this sense, is like the philosopher's fire in alchemy, not destruction, but purification. The ego cannot predict this process. It wants safety, agreement, certainty, but the self seeks something deeper. It seeks wholeness, and wholeness includes conflict, includes discomfort, includes rupture and repair. Love, when real, does not anesthetize the psyche, it awakens it. One must be willing to suffer this awakening, not as punishment, but as passage. The right person is not a balm, they are a summons. And the feelings they evoke, ambivalence, vulnerability, longing, fear, are not signs to flee, but invitations to stay. To stay and feel, to stay and speak, to stay and wrestle with the inner parts that long for love, yet fear exposure. Do not confuse the presence of conflict with the absence of meaning. In fact, it is often the very proof of it. The wrong person may leave you unbothered. The right person will leave you changed. You may weep, you may rage, you may wish to return to your solitude, but something within will know this is the threshold, this is where the journey begins, not into the other, but into yourself through the other. And that is the mark of the right person. Not that they give you peace, but that they call you to depth. Not that they align with your expectations, but that they awaken your essence. Not that they fit your fantasy, but that they fracture it so that the self may emerge. Let us continue. The real union is yet to come. Part 6, the inner marriage, love as alchemical union. The longing we experience in the presence of the right person is not merely for connection with them. It is the echo of a deeper archetypal hunger. It is the soul's yearning for wholeness, for what the alchemists called the conjunctio oppositorum, the sacred union of opposites within. Love, in this deepest sense, is not an emotional state. It is a psychic process. And when it is real, it evokes the alchemical work within the individual. You do not seek the right person merely to be loved. You seek them because something in their presence calls forth what has long slept in you. Their gaze does not complete you. It activates the need to complete yourself. This is why I have said that the right person does not bring peace. They bring heat. In their nearness, old psychic structures begin to melt. The persona begins to crumble. The shadow stirs. The opposites within, masculine and feminine, thought and feeling, ego and self, begin to circle one another in the vessel of the soul. The alchemists knew this. They spoke of sulfur and mercury, of fixed and volatile substances, of the king and queen. But what they described symbolically was a process that occurs psychically. in every human being who dares to love from the depths. The union of opposites does not happen by accident. It is the culmination of immense inner work, of confronting the shadow, of dialoguing with the inner other, of enduring the heat of transformation. And so it is with the right person. They arrive not to deliver a happy ending, but to announce the beginning of the opus, the great work. You may dream of them before they come. Perhaps they appear as a wedding you attend alone, or as a figure who holds both a sword and a chalice, symbols of discrimination and receptivity. You feel the tension in their presence, for they are not simply another, they are the archetype, clothed in flesh. A patient once dreamed of sitting alone at an altar, awaiting a bride. But when she arrived, she said, "I am not here to marry you. I am here to return the part of you you left behind." He awoke in tears, not of sorrow, but of realization. He had been seeking the wrong thing, not union with another, but union with himself. That is the secret. The right person is not your missing half. They are the mirror of the part you abandoned long ago. Their love is not the balm. It is the invitation to reclaim, to integrate, to become whole. When the inner marriage begins, it is often marked by paradoxical feelings. You feel known, yet mysterious, safe, yet stretched. You feel as if you are coming home, but to a home you have never visited. This is the mark of the self, for it does not announce itself with novelty, but with deep familiarity. You do not say, "Who is this?" You say, "Where have I seen this before?" And indeed you have. In dreams, in symbols, in forgotten memories. The soul has been preparing long before the meeting. The psyche, through countless images, stories, and inner figures, has been constellating the readiness. When the person arrives, they do not bring something new. They reveal something ancient. The relationship that follows is not free of hardship. In fact, it may be harder than any before. For the closer one draws to wholeness, the more fiercely the fragmented ego resists. The more the self appears, the more the false self panics. You may try to sabotage, to retreat, to doubt, but beneath all of this, the process continues. The fire burns, the vessel holds, and if you can stay, not only with them, but with yourself, something begins to form. The alchemists called it the philosopher's stone. The psychologists call it individuation, but it is in essence the same. The emergence of the real from the ruins of the false. This is the nature of the inner marriage, not fantasy, but embodiment, not idealization, but presence. You are no longer seeking perfection. You are seeking contact with reality, with the soul, with the other as they truly are. And strangely, you begin to love differently, not as possession, not as projection, but as recognition. You no longer say, "You complete me." You say, "You reflect the wholeness I now see in myself." This is not arrogance, it is humility. For to see the other truly, one must have seen oneself truly. To love the other deeply, one must have descended into the depths of the self. And to remain in love, one must continue this work day after day, not out of duty, but out of reverence. For love at this level is sacred. It is no longer a negotiation between needs. It is a dialogue between souls. Each honors the mystery in the other. Each respects the autonomy of the other's becoming. Each rejoices not in what is possessed, but in what is revealed. The inner marriage is not a state. It is a movement, a spiral, a continual turning toward what is most real. And in this turning, the relationship becomes something rare, not a fulfillment of fantasy, but a vessel for transformation. And the man who enters this union is not the same man who longed for it. He has been tempered. The woman who receives this love is not the same woman who once feared it. She has been initiated. Together, they do not become one. They become two who are whole, and in their wholeness, they create something larger. Let us now move forward to the final unfolding. Once the soul has been seen, it cannot go back to sleep. And whether the right person stays or leaves, the mark they leave behind is irreversible. The self, once glimpsed, cannot be forgotten. It becomes the guiding light. And from this light, all future love must emerge. Part 7, the aftermath, when the soul has been seen. There comes a moment in the psychic journey when one is no longer the same, when an encounter, brief or enduring, has altered the internal structure so irreversibly that the ego can no longer maintain its previous illusions. This is the mark of having met not merely a person, but a mirror of the self. And it is here, in the quiet ruins of the old self, that the real work begins. To be seen, not as persona, not as shadow, not as image, but in one's totality, is among the most terrifying and liberating experiences the psyche can endure. It is not to be admired or desired or praised, but to be perceived with the eye of truth. No mask can survive it, no projection can sustain it, and often no relationship can contain it. For this is not an ordinary encounter, it is an archetypal event, a visitation from the mystery that lives at the center of being. The aftermath of such an encounter is not always peace. More often, it is disturbance. For the soul has been stirred, and the ego now stands in its trembling presence. One feels both more known and more exposed. One may experience moments of elation followed by deep grief. One may feel the urge to return to the safety of unconsciousness, but the path is closed. The eye that has opened cannot unsee. I have seen this many times in the course of analysis. A patient, after meeting someone who evokes the self, comes into the room both radiant and haunted. They say, "I have never felt so seen, and now I do not know who I am." This is not confusion, this is revelation. For identity, as the ego once conceived it, has been shattered. What remains is not the answer, but the real question. If I am not who I thought I was, who am I becoming? This question is sacred. It signals the initiation into individuation, that long and uncertain process by which one becomes whole. The right person, whether they stay or vanish like a dream, has served their purpose. They have broken the spell of self-deception. They have opened the door. What lies beyond it is not love as the world defines it, but love as the soul demands it. Such a love does not always seek to possess. Sometimes it must leave precisely because its work is done, or because the fire it lit cannot yet be born, or because the task now is no longer to fuse with the other, but to integrate what they revealed. The person remains not in the flesh, but in the psyche, as symbol, as guide, as question. A patient once dreamed of walking through a city in flames. All around him, people ran in panic. He entered a ruined cathedral and found sitting at the altar the one he had loved and lost. She looked at him and said only, "You are ready." When he awoke, he wept, not for her, but for himself, for what he now knew, that the fire was not destruction, it was purification. This is what remains when the right person has touched the soul. Not memory, but transformation. Not nostalgia, but emergence. One is not left with longing, but with a task to live up to what was seen, to become what the other awakened. The world, however, may not understand this. It teaches us to measure the value of relationships by their longevity, their stability, their external markers of success. But the soul measures differently. It asks, did this person reveal to you something true? Did they awaken in you the capacity to see, to suffer, to become? Sometimes the most significant relationship is not the one that stays, but the one that scars, because the scar remains as a sign, not of wounding, but of opening. It is the place where the light entered. In myth, such encounters are often marked by loss. Orpheus sees Eurydice, but turns too soon. Psyche wins back Eros, but only after descending into the underworld. These are not stories of failure, they are stories of becoming. For the soul cannot be held too tightly. It must be courted, lost, sought again. The path to the self is never straight. It is spiral, labyrinthine, full of detours that are not mistakes, but initiations. And so if the right person has come and gone, do not despair. They have not taken something from you. They have given something you did not know you lacked. And the absence you now feel is not emptiness. It is space being made for the greater self that is now forming. Another patient, years after such an encounter, dreamed of returning to an old house. In every room was a different memory. But in one room, bare, with only a single chair, he found a window. Outside it, the landscape had changed. It was wider, wilder. And he knew he could no longer live in the house alone. He had to step outside. He had to risk becoming. That is the gift of the one who sees you. Not comfort, but courage. Not companionship, but calling. What now? How does one live after being seen? The answer is not to search for the person again or to recreate the experience. It is to live in such a way that their gaze is justified. To make your life an offering to what they awakened. To build within yourself the temple their presence revealed. The self is both center and circumference, the whole of the personality, conscious and unconscious, lived and unlived. When someone constellates the self in you, they are not giving you something. They are reflecting your own wholeness back to you. What you saw in them was what lies dormant in you. And now the task is to awaken it. You may find that your dreams shift, that your body responds differently, that your choices begin to change. This is the subtle, inexorable movement of the self asserting its authority. You are no longer living from the ego alone. You are being guided from within. This is not an easy life. It is not a peaceful life, but it is a meaningful one. You will find that you cannot go back to certain patterns, that certain relationships feel empty, that certain lies can no longer be told. This is the cost of being seen, but it is also the reward. In time you may meet another, not to repeat the past, but to continue the work. And perhaps this time you will not project so much. You will not demand completion. You will not fear the silence, for you will have learned to hold the gaze, not of the other, but of yourself. You will look into the mirror and not flinch. You will speak from the place that was once broken. You will love not because you need, but because you are whole enough to give. And if once more the soul sends you someone, not to soothe but to awaken, you will know what to do. You will not grasp. You will not retreat. You will stand and you will see. The right person is not a reward. They are a message. They say, this is what you are capable of. This is who you might become. And then they leave or stay or vanish like a dream. But the message remains. And the self, once stirred, will not rest. Live now in such a way that their presence is not forgotten. Live now in such a way that your soul feels seen even when alone. For this is the aftermath, not an ending but a beginning, not a closing but a threshold, not a loss but a becoming.